Okay, so let's try and unpack this. If you're thinking about changing the world, is it better to have like one massive organized movement,
Right.
one big banner,
Mm.
or is real change maybe found in, I don't know, thousands of smaller, maybe even chaotic acts of resistance?
That's exactly the tension, isn't it? It's this fundamental, almost ancient conflict we're diving into today.
Yeah.
Between that drive for large-scale, unified social change, we're calling it holism here.
Holism, got it.
And on the other hand, those who really celebrate the fragmented, the decentralized, the sort of expressive resistance, the anti-holists.
And this isn't just philosophical noodling, right? This tension really shapes how movements actually organize themselves.
Absolutely. How they talk, how they strategize. Or maybe if they can strategize effectively in the long run.
So our mission today is to trace this whole debate. We'll go from foundational stories and thinkers like Marx.
Through the big shifts in the 1960s.
Right, the New Left. And then bring it right up to contemporary critiques of power, politics, even intellectual style.
Exactly. And the sources we're drawing on, they really push us to look critically at this. How this focus on difference, on fragmentation, might actually, maybe inadvertently, limit real political action.
Okay, so where do we start? You mentioned ancient stories.
Yeah, we almost have to begin with the Tower of Babel. It's that foundational myth, isn't it?
Right, the idea that humans trying to build this one unifying thing.
One language, one tower.
It leads to divine anger, chaos, dispersal, basically a warning against grand, unified human projects.
A sort of ancient caution.
Mm.
Unity imposed by humans might not be possible or even desirable in this world.
But then fast forward a bit and you get the Enlightenment.
Right, and the Enlightenment thinkers, they essentially said, okay, maybe not divine unity, but we can achieve rational unity. They secularized that ambition.
So they wanted to build their own kind of tower.
In a way, yes. Metaphorically, rebuilding Babel,
Mm-hmm.
but through reason, universal justice. Establishing a new Jerusalem, a heaven on earth achieved by human effort.
But isn't there a huge danger there? I mean, you look at history and these grand universal movements. Sometimes they end up crushing the very people they're supposed to help, right? Doesn't the pursuit of the perfect whole often damage the individual parts?
That's the inherent paradox, absolutely. And someone like Karl Marx, the 19th century, he absolutely needed that universal vision. He was searching for a common language.
Like a political Esperanto.
Exactly, a metaphorical Esperanto to unite workers across all these different cultures, nations, specific interests.
Fragmented interests.
Yes, fragmented interests. He wanted to forge them into one single, powerful historical force, the proletariat.
And he thought capitalism itself was kind of doing the groundwork for that, by breaking down old loyalties.
He did. He argued that capitalism, by its nature, stripped away things like nationality, local culture, showing them as, well, maybe superficial in the face of economic reality. It was creating the conditions for a new kind of global structure.
Okay, so Marx sets up the need for unity. How do we get to strategy?
Well, that really brings us to Antonio Gramsci. He offers a very strategic answer. Gramsci wasn't after some abstract metaphysical unity. He wanted a concrete strategic force.
And that's the modern Prens.
That's the modern Prens, yes, which for him meant the revolutionary political party, or more broadly, the collective will, needed to build a whole new ethical order, a new Sittlichkeit.
So not a single ruler, but a structure, a disciplined political organization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And crucially, he was intensely pragmatic about it. He knew the parts, workers, intellectuals, different groups were essential, but the overall strategy had to guide the parts. As our sources put it, for Gramsci, the whole is necessarily prior to the parts.
You need coordination, like in a war.
Precisely. And for Gramsci, political struggle was a kind of war. It required strategic thinking, coordination, discipline.
Okay, so Marx lays the groundwork. Gramsci provides the strategic blueprint for this unified, holistic movement.
And then came the 1960s.
Right, the New Left. And they looked at that blueprint and basically said, no thanks.
Pretty much. They launched this fundamental challenge to the whole centralized strategic structure of what they started calling the old left.
The traditional communist and socialist parties.
Yeah. They saw them as rigid, bureaucratic, maybe too focused just on economics, ignoring culture, psychology.
And the New Left just blew that wide open.
They really did.
Yeah.
And you could see it in about, 5 key characteristics or shifts.
Okay, what were they?
First, a huge emphasis on individual expression. It felt like a moral revolt, almost personal.
Less about party discipline, more about authenticity.
You could say that. Second, they broadened the critique way beyond just economics, culture, daily life, psychology. It was all political. Third, direct action became central, less focus on traditional party politics.
More protests, sit-ins, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Fourth, a real commitment to participatory democracy, grassroots control, power from the bottom up.
And the fifth, this sounds like where the tension really bites.
It is. Their fifth key element was this deep dedication to decentralization, diversity of structures, diversity of actions, the fundamentally distrusted centralized planning or authority.
Okay, wait. If you're all about individual expression, participation, decentralization, aren't you potentially sacrificing strategic coherence?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Did they worry they were, like, throwing out the strategic baby with the bathwater, giving up the ability to actually coordinate and win for the sake of ideological purity?
A lot of people at the time certainly thought so. Herbert Marcuse, who was often associated with the New Left,
Right.
he pointed out what he saw as an anarchist and even non-political tendency. He called it a kind of romantic expressivism.
Meaning the feeling, the expression became the point more than the political outcome.
That's the critique, yes. The sincerity of the individual's revolt mattered more than contributing to a unified strategic goal.
And some took this even further. You mentioned Norman O. Brown.
Oh, yeah. Brown went radical. For him, the problem wasn't just the old left structure. It was rational thought itself.
Logic was the enemy.
He called it the brutal logos. He saw logic and reason as oppressive forces. His goal was to actually destroy it.
Destroy reason. How would that lead to unity? It sounds like chaos.
Well, that was kind of his point.
Right.
He argued that logic, clarity, reasoned argument, they create division and conflict. He was aiming for something like a Pentecostal union,
Okay.
achieved by shattering the prison house of meaning, as he put it. He paradoxically believed true unity could only emerge from non-conscious, maybe even chaotic means. If rational communication divides us, maybe something else can unite us.
Wow. Okay. That definitely sets the stage for what comes next with post-structuralism.
It really does. The New Left's suspicion of central strategy, Brown's attack on reason, it creates the intellectual space for thinkers like Michel Foucault.
And Foucault takes that rejection of the whole even further, right?
Much further. He fundamentally rejected the idea that you could even study society as a single whole system.
And he also rejected experience, like our personal feelings or understanding aren't reliable.
Right. He saw the individual subject, our inner life, our Lebenswelt, not as a source of truth, but as an effect, a product of power structures.
So if you can't see society as a whole and you can't trust individual experience, what does that do to our ability to understand the world, let alone change it?
Well, it essentially hollows out what C. Wright Mills called the sociological imagination.
The ability to connect personal troubles to larger public issues, to see how the parts fit the whole.
Exactly. If you deny the coherence of the whole system, you lose the map. You can't see how different struggles or issues might be connected within a larger structure of power.
And if you can't see the system,
Then political strategy becomes almost impossible.
yeah,
How can you plan effective action if you don't believe there's a coherent system to act against?
you can't figure out the enemy's general strategy, so you can't develop your own counter-strategy.
Precisely. You're left with maybe localized resistance, tactical skirmishes, but not a coordinated strategic movement aimed at fundamental change.
Okay, so Foucault's ideas make strategic planning difficult, theoretically. But how does this rejection of the whole actually show up? Like in the real world, in how people talk or act?
This is where things get really interesting and maybe a bit troubling, because this intellectual trend towards anti-holism starts to intersect with the market.
How so?
When the focus shifts away from trying to grasp a unified substance or system, it often shifts towards celebrating individual style and difference, which leads us to this concept of commodity aesthetics.
Commodity aesthetics. Okay, break that down.
It's the idea that in today's saturated markets, selling something often isn't just about its usefulness, its function.
It's about the brand, the look, the feel.
Exactly. It needs aesthetic innovation, a distinctive style, a brand mastery that often overshadows the actual use value. Think Apple versus a generic PC, maybe.
Right. The style is the substance, in a way.
And the argument in our sources is that something similar started happening in critical theory itself. Some theorists became known more for their unique, often complex style, their intellectual brand, than for the, let's say, overall consistency or practical applicability of their arguments.
Style over substance, even in critiquing the system.
That's the claim. A kind of Baroque theory where demonstrating originality through a distinctive style becomes paramount.
There's an analogy used here, right, about PowerPoint.
Yes, Edward Tuft's critique of PowerPoint is a great analogy. Tuft argued that PowerPoint, by its very design,
With its bullet points and templates.
prioritizes surface form, decoration, fragmented information, arbitrary slides, rather than deep integrated analytical content. It makes it harder to present complex, reasoned arguments.
It encourages style over analytical depth.
Exactly. And that focus on stylized, fragmented presentation, whether in PowerPoint or in some forms of theory, can weaken genuine analysis and communication. It looks sophisticated, but might actually obscure understanding.
And this rhetoric of fragmentation, of breaking boundaries, it can be easily adopted by powerful institutions.
Alarmingly easily. It can be co-opted.
Tell us about that Xerox example, because that seems like a perfect illustration, using radical language inside a giant corporation.
Right. Lucy Suchman at Xerox PRC. A really fascinating case. She was applying quite advanced feminist epistemology.
Okay.
Ideas about partial knowledge, critiquing dualisms like designer versus user, emphasizing situated action, all very much in that anti-holistic, difference-oriented vein. And she applied it to improve product design at Xerox.
So using the language of boundary violations, challenging hierarchies within Xerox.
Yes, using that critical, fragmentation-focused language internally to try and make better products, essentially.
And what happened? Did it revolutionize Xerox?
Well, no. The outcome was pretty stark. Xerox eventually shut down the entire research center, PRC, around 2000, largely because the research, including Suchman's group, wasn't seen as directly profitable enough.
So all that talk about boundary crossing and partial knowledge
Was ultimately irrelevant, it seems, when it came to the bottom line, generating surplus value. The argument is that the market, or capital, might find the aesthetic of fragmentation and critique appealing for a while.
It sounds cool, rebellious.
Right. But it'll discard that aesthetic instantly if it doesn't translate into profit. The rhetoric gets co-opted and then dropped.
Okay, so if this language of fragmentation is so easily absorbed and then discarded by capital, the real danger becomes clear.
Exactly. The ultimate danger, according to this critique, is that this widespread focus on fragmentation, on difference above all else, is actually something desired by existing power structures.
Why? Because it prevents unity.
Precisely. It cuts off the potential universal meaning that could link different specific struggles. If every group is only focused on its unique oppression, it becomes much harder to form a broad, unified counter-hegemony capable of challenging the system as a whole.
Fragmentation keeps potential allies divided.
That's the risk.
So, if pure fragmentation is a potential dead end, strategically speaking, what's the alternative? How do you respect difference without losing the ability to unite?
Well, the path forward proposed in the source material is towards something called metahumanism.
Metahumanism, okay.
It's framed as an extension of humanism, but broadened to include non-human others, and crucially, driven by an ethical focus on empathy.
Empathy. Sympathy for suffering.
Yes. Empathy is presented as the key. It's what allows us to have secondhand experiences, to understand and feel something of the pain or oppression of others, even if their identity or situation is different from our own.
And that shared feeling, that empathy, is what can bind movements together.
It's the phenomenological glue, as the source puts it. It allows solidarity to form across different identities, class, race, gender, nationality, based on a shared recognition of suffering and a desire for justice.
Is there an example of this kind of empathy in action?
A really powerful one mentioned is the Zapatista subcomandante Marcos.
From Chiapas, Mexico.
Exactly. He embodied this kind of expansive empathy in his public statements. He famously declared things like, Marcos is gay in San Francisco, black in South Africa, an Asian in Europe, a Chicano in San Isidro, an anarchist in Spain, a Palestinian in Israel, a Mayan Indian in the streets of San Cristobal, a Jew in Germany, a feminist in the political parties, and so on.
Wow. So he wasn't literally claiming all those identities.
No, of course not. He was saying, I stand in solidarity with the suffering and struggle of all these oppressed groups. Their fight is my fight. He used the very language of fragmented identities.
But used it to build bridges, to create solidarity, not isolation.
Precisely. It's a solidarity based on recognizing shared vulnerability and opposition to oppressive systems.
That connects back then to Gramsci's idea of the modern Prince, doesn't it? But maybe in a new form.
Exactly. Maybe a postmodern Prince, you could say. There's a visual metaphor used Octavio Ocampo's painting, Portrait of the Causa.
Cesar Chavez's face.
Right. But when you look closer, his face is composed of countless diverse farm workers. Men, women, different ages, different backgrounds.
Ah, so the unity emerges from the diversity.
Yes, it represents a vision of strategic unity that is achieved through difference, not by erasing it. It echoes Gramsci's idea that the political form, the Prens, needs to be heterogeneous, made of unlike parts. But those parts must be dialectically connected to the whole, working together.
A unity that respects the parts but coordinates them towards a common goal.
That's the ideal, yes.
Yeah.
A new strategic form that emerges from the diverse elements themselves.
So, wrapping this up, we've really traced this deep ongoing tension between the pull towards unity, seeing the whole picture.
And the celebration of fragmentation, difference, expression.
And it seems clear that while fragmentation is vital, it challenges old hierarchies, breaks down rigid thinking,
Absolutely essential.
an overemphasis on it, or an inability to then articulate a coherent vision of the larger system carries real risks. It can undermine the possibility of effective, strategic, long-term political action.
It leaves movements vulnerable to co-option and ultimately makes it harder to build the broad coalition needed for fundamental change.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty challenging thought to consider, especially when looking at social movements today. If political struggle really is, as Clausewitz said about war, a game of wills,
Where strategy, planning, anticipating your opponent are crucial.
can a movement truly succeed if it decides that only spontaneous, expressive, decentralized action is legitimate? If it refuses, on principle, to engage in that kind of rational strategic thinking?
Finding that balance between authentic expression and strategic coherence, between celebrating difference and forging unity, that seems to be the critical challenge.
Definitely something to keep thinking about.